Welcome everybody. Thrilled to be with you guys today to just give you a little bit of an abridged version of the presentation we gave earlier at CLO Symposium on distinctly human learning strategies. Now, I'm from an organization called Insights, which is a global learning and consulting organization. You might know us for our Insights Discovery profile, but we've been doing some research about what does it mean to really create space for humanity inside of our learning and development initiatives. I happen to be on our product development team. I'm our chief learning architect for the organization and happen to be a third-generation Houstonian with blue hair as well. But before we get into the session, think a little bit about the fact that as we have people come into these conferences, we all kind of come in from our different backgrounds and we look around the room and we don't often think about the fact that these people that we're seated next to or across from all week long are actually fellow human beings, that there are people back at home that helped them to be here today, or mentors who helped guide their career into learning and development. So let's just begin from the perspective of maybe looking beyond the role, beyond the name tag, to the human being that we all are. Now, in our session today, we started with a conversation. We actually had people first talk about something that makes them happy. You might be surprised by that, but that actually brings up some really positive chemicals in our brain, dopamine, to be able to be positive. And it's this idea of appreciative inquiry that as we think about something positive, before we perhaps talk about something that's been a little challenging for us. For example, the changes and disruption that we may have in our organizations. We heard things in our presentation today about everything from a change in CEO to a reorg or restructure, or even a divestiture of a business where things were being broken apart. Now, all of this change that we're living in is indicative of not just the world around us, but even our workplace. It's changing dramatically from virtual teams to across multiple time zones. Collaboration is becoming the job of employees, where we're having to work together more and more. In fact, in some cases, some employees have over 75% of their time being focused on collaborating with other people. Some of our jobs are changing, and with AI and robotics possibly replacing those jobs. But at the same time, we're hearing from organizations like the World Economic Forum that maybe our ability to absorb and deal with this amount of disruptive change might be at its limits. We might be pushing just a little too hard. The challenge is, if our workplaces are changing and our world is changing, so are our learners. Think about the learner of the future and the currency of attention. Some of these statistics might resonate with you if you picked up your phone before you got out of bed this morning. But additionally, our learners are actually only having, with all of this time, about 1% of their work week for learning and development. Less than 24 minutes available. How do we harness that? And especially if 72% of our workforce, according to IDC, are going to be mobile by the year 2020, doing work while the kids are in the background, or maybe at a co-working site in another location, or at a client's facility. The bottom line is our workers and our learners, more importantly, aren't all in one place. How do we create the connection and the learning strategies that work for this type of workforce? Interestingly, only 4 in 10 employees today say that they feel like they have the learning opportunities they need. But if we were to double that number, if 8 in 10 said they had the learning opportunities, we'd actually see an increase or a decrease in absenteeism, a decrease in health and safety incidents, and an increase in productivity. That's amazing data that we could have an impact on if we just provided the learning resources to our people. The challenge is too, with apps, we've got a more expectation for highly personalized, kind of uniquely app-based learning. What we used to do in L&D doesn't work anymore in this new world because of the changing nature of expectations of our learners. Now, one more thing is changing, and it's our humanity. With all of this disruption, how do we make space for the human conversation, the human element? Hopefully this isn't what you guys see at your dinner table. I happened to be at a restaurant here in the hotel and actually saw this exact thing happen. I was even more surprised when at the end of their meal, the waiters brought out a birthday cake. It was actually someone's birthday, but 3 out of the 5 people were looking at smartphones. The only 2 that weren't, a young child and a grandmother. Really surprising. Additionally, we have issues of isolation. We know that absenteeism may cost us 4 days a year per employee, but what about those actively disengaged employees who are present but not productive? This data is very scary data that we've been seeing from Cigna. We shared it in some of our other sessions as well. Just look at the research that's come out about loneliness in America. It's an epidemic. And Cigna did this research because they believe it's a health epidemic, more dangerous than obesity and alcoholism combined. And additionally, the chief medical officer for Cigna believes that workplaces have a role to play. In fact, maybe one of the key places to be a part of the critical solution. This one statistic just shocked me that only 53% say that they have a meaningful in-person social interaction on a daily basis. If they're coming to work, shouldn't they have a meaningful in-person social interaction? What does all this mean for us, though, as learning leaders, as chief learning officers? You know, we have our mandate that our organizations are having to achieve our goals and our strategy faster than ever before. And also, how do we ensure that we've got our people to come along for the ride in this age of disruption? Because not only is the change affecting them in the workplace, it's affecting them in their home lives as well. How do we balance the needs of our learners, of our employees, the needs of our organization, and the needs of our shared humanity? So we had a group of folks kind of get together and talk about in our audience today, what was one personal breakthrough that they had experienced recently? And we heard we heard things like people having to deal with particular issues with their family members, or perhaps overcoming an adversity that came into their life, whether it was a health-based adversity or something else. But then we had them think about those same personal breakthroughs that they had, and we asked them, how did that affect them professionally? How did their overcoming something personally help them in the workplace? And we heard things like setting priorities more effectively, or leaning into difficult conversations with less fear, more willing to take risks. These personal breakthroughs were really impacting business breakthroughs for the organization. The idea that perhaps insights for your people, with these types of breakthroughs that people had, that they could actually create breakthroughs for your business. Greater employee engagement, greater inclusivity or creativity or innovation, greater organizational agility. Now, we believe that there are three things we can do to create distinctly human learning strategies as learning leaders. And so we want to talk about each of these as we kind of present our session to you today. The first is we want to be able to make sure we're creating better human beings as well as better employees. That we're creating a healthy system as well as treating the symptoms of our organizational effectiveness. And finally, that we're seeing our people as a community, not just a commodity. So let's take a look. When we talk about employees or human beings, it's about the both and. We have to teach people, we have to know that we're creating better employees that are fit for purpose for our strategy, that are fit for purpose for our skills gaps that we have in our organization. But we should also be thinking about better human beings. That things like emotional competence, resilience, empathy, reflective thinking, considering our purpose and legacy and how we bring that to life. There are also some fundamentally human skills that we need to begin to make space for in our learning. Things like growth mindset, authenticity, even curiosity. These skills are not just for leaders anymore. We've often left them in that space, but what if we made them fundamental skills as part of onboarding for our organizations? Now, the second concept is, are we creating a healthy system, or are we treating symptoms? Think about this when you think about your team building in your organization. How often do we go to the teams that are broken or that people are complaining about? What if instead we created a focus on building a healthy environment for our teams? How do we help every employee be the best team member that they can be? Again, it's about both and. It's not just about treating the symptoms, focusing on problems. We've got to still do that. But what if we really put our energy more to creating a healthy system, taking a systemic view where we were creating things like culture, focusing on learning skills or teaming skills, maybe even leadership charters that go across the entire organization, or common tools and language. This is certainly something that we do at Insights. We had a client of ours in particular, the company called FMC Technip, that was wanting to be the flagship company for health and safety. They put hundreds of people on these ships that go out and service oil and gas facilities all over the world, sometimes from multiple countries and speaking multiple languages. But they needed to make sure that those people on those ships were as passionate and caring about each other's health and safety as they were about their own. How did they do it? They created conversations and opportunities for people to learn about their families, about the human dynamic within each of their relationships. Really getting a sense of what that culture was, so it shifted from being, I'm from this country, you're from that country, to being, we're on this ship together, and we've got to make sure we're looking out for each other. Huge transformation in their health and safety initiative and in their health and safety incidents as well. Very significant by focusing on the system, not just trying to fix the symptoms. Finally, it's about community. And when we think about creating community and learning, there's a couple of principles. First, we can embed and align it with our shared values. We could support the development of meaningful relationships, focusing on the conversations, not just the content. And finally, creating safe spaces for disclosure and meaningful connection. I want to talk about all four of these very briefly. So when we talk about shared values, inside of an organization, the values are part of the system that I was just talking about. And when we really bring it in, what creates community is two things primarily. It's shared purpose or shared values. We have a shared goal that we're doing. And the second is shared experiences. When we go through difficult times together, those may take time, but when we realign to our purpose and our values and our mission, we can build a sense of community. We can talk about what these mean to us. The second aspect of creating community is creating meaningful relationships, which in the days of social media might be a little more confusing as to what is a meaningful relationship. I mean, this is a list of just some of my own Facebook friends. And there's people on here from my mother to my partner to a person I went to high school with to a drag queen I know in Portland. I mean, it's pretty varied on the list, right? But which ones of those are meaningful? And what about for us? Who knows us at work? Who knows us better than just what I do, but they know who I am? One of the things that we can do in our organizations is in our learning experiences, we can create more space for conversation. Some of you are familiar, I know, with Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation or Jack Phillips in the ROI Institute. One of the things that when we do work on leadership development or team building or any of these human interaction skills, the difference between understanding, level 2, and application is in the space of conversation. It's one thing to know what good team building is. How do you have good team building? How do you apply it? It's when the team talks to one another. It's when the leaders talk to their people. You see, the application for human skills-based learning is in the application. It's in the conversation. And that's what creates community. So we've been looking at ways we can create more space, not to give more content, but to actually pull content out and create more space for application. And we're getting great feedback from our customers about it already. We even have an activity that we do from an author named Mike Robbins called Lowering the Waterline, where we invite leaders to share, if you really knew me, you'd know that. And let's say right now, if you really knew me, you'd know that I'm really excited to share this content with you today. Step 2 is, if you really, really knew me, going a little deeper, lowering the waterline, you'd know that I'm a little nervous because it's some new content for me that I haven't presented before we came to this event this week. Third level, if you really, really, really knew me, you know that this is content I'm incredibly passionate about because I believe that more than ever, our humanity is going to be our competitive advantage in the future. And it's an issue that our society and our world is facing that we have to address. Now, that level of guided disclosure, at whatever level you're comfortable with, I went at my level. Helping leaders to do that and to practice and flex those muscles of disclosure leads to growth. Vulnerability and disclosure leads to growing relationships, growing communities, creating those kind of shared experiences. So again, 3 facets that we've talked about: creating better human beings as well as better employees, looking at the skill sets of both, creating a healthy system as well as treating the symptoms. We still have to take care of those problem teams or those problem leaders, and seeing people as a community rather than a commodity. I hope at the end of the session today, you'll be able to think about one thing that you might be able to do, one program in your organization that you can actually find, where can I integrate more human learning strategies? How can I create space for a little more humanity in some of these programs I offer? Or maybe even for yourself, where can you in your own work, in your own personality, in your own life, can you strengthen your own humanity? It's a place for you to be more curious, to be more empathetic. And hopefully if there's an action you can take, we encourage you to do so. I hope that you've learned from this. We are actually writing a book that is coming out in the next month or two on rediscovering human, and you can find more information there at the link. But if you have questions or want to talk further, be happy to do so. Thanks for your time today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.